my takeaway from what Coach Heupel said and talking to people, and yes, I think George performed. I think George had a good day. I think George performed better than probably the expectation people had for George to perform. I don't think that means George is getting the keys to the car right now. Okay, nobody's turning him loose with it and saying, "Hey, it's yours." It's not close to being that. I think what George has done through the first 2 weeks of camp, and this is my takeaway from George, and this is my opinion, and you guys can totally disagree with me, and I won't hurt my feelings in the least. My takeaway from it is all George has done is continue to insert himself into the race. Does that mean he's going to win the race? No. I mean, I don't. I would be surprised, really surprised, if he was Tennessee's starting quarterback. Okay, I don't think Tennessee's going to go to Atlanta with George MacIntyre as the guy. But Josh Heupel said it, Rob, in the post deal when I asked the question. They don't plan to dramatically pair routes or reps or dramatically change the reps. They're still going to try to equally get all three guys, quality, reps as they can get in there. That tells me George has done a good job staying in the race, because I think a lot of us thought it might get pared down after the first scrimmage, and it doesn't seem like that's the case right now.
No, I think that's significant. I mean, because I'm not going to say Josh feels like, he's under the gun or he's got a self-imposed deadline, but, the quicker you get this thing down to 2 and then 1, the better for everybody. So, that clearly as the head coach, your preference would be to pare that thing down. And the fact that George, has not, his play hadn't allowed him to do that, I think speaks a lot about the kid. I mean, because if you were handicapping the thing, you would think the true freshman that had never taken a college snap would be, an easy cut after the first week. All right, we gave you a fair shot. You're no hard feelings. You should be behind. But no, I mean, he's, like you said, Hubbard, he's inserting himself in there, and I think that I would, like you, be surprised if he's the starter in Atlanta. But it speaks well to just the kid's makeup and what he's got going on mentally.
Yeah, he just hadn't gone away, and again, that's a credit to him. And I think he's going to be a good quarterback. Of the three, maybe down the line, he could be the best quarterback. I think he's going to be really good. So give him credit. I think he's had a really good fall. I think he obviously, as you pointed out, he had a good scrimmage the other day. But in a perfect world, I mean, leaving scrimmage 1, heading into 2 weeks into camp, heading into week 3, in a perfect world, you want to pare down those reps. You want to focus on 1 to 2 guys, because again, Syracuse is getting closer. And this week we're in right now, Brent, you kind of did a good job of breaking it down. This is technically kind of like the last full week of true camp, because next week's going to be a mock game week. They're going to go through the week as if they're playing on Saturday, and then the following week it is game week. It's time to go. So those reps are going to have to be pared down. That's why I think Friday is huge. Friday, second scrimmage, right, wrong, indifferent. You're going to have to pare down those reps. You're going to have to pick a guy or 2 guys and move forward, because again, the season's getting closer, and those guys need all the reps they can get.
Well, I think what's going to be fascinating about Friday and the feedback we're going to hear on Friday, everybody's going to want to know who performed the best, and obviously that's the overarching storyline. But my thing is, how do they divide the reps up Friday?
Yeah,
I mean, has George done enough that you're going to give him a long, hard look, or are you going to give him a legitimate look with some number ones, throwing to number 1 receivers and with the quote starting offensive line? Are you going to give him some first team reps against the first team defense? I think that's heading into the scrimmage. I think that's the big question right now is where does that shake out? Because that says a lot about what this thing looks like in terms of whether, even if George is not the starter, and again, I don't think he will be, is he the number 2? Or is he going to be clearly the number 3 non-factor guy? I mean, those are things that I think are going to be interesting to see how it develops this week. I know this about George. What's fascinating is Joey Aguilar is 6 years older than George MacIntyre is, which is kind of crazy in a room. At that age, 6 years is a lifetime. I mean, a lifetime of living. 24 to 18 is vastly, vastly different, right? But I do think, even though George Robb is kind of that baby-faced, all-American kind of looking guy, I think he's got some competitive in him that probably people don't realize. And I think he probably sees a bit of a window right now, and I'm curious to see how he attacks this week if he feels different, right? I mean, if you go into that first scrimmage and think, I'm going to get a couple of series here. We'll see what this looks like. But you get more than you thought you were going to get, and you perform well coming out of it. How do you attack this week if you're George MacIntyre? My guess is he is after it this week and continues to try to put the pressure on those guys because he's got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
He's not supposed to win it. The pressure is really on Merklinger more than anybody else.
I would agree with that. And how many of these kids like that we talk to right now, Eric? I know you. I mean, and you stand beside each other a lot in those interviews, like that are going to be sophomores, right, or going to the second year. Jordan Ross, or whoever. Just man, I didn't really take it all that serious last year, but this year it's way different. I'm locked in. Blah blah. George MacIntyre's locked in right now. He doesn't have that freshman mindset, and I don't blame a lot of those guys. I mean, I'm not saying Jordan, and Jordan Ross is just what I remember. There's been like 6 or 7 of those kids, say the same kind of thing. But my point being, George MacIntyre is not your typical freshman in that regard. He's not looked at the depth chart and said, screw it, I'm not gonna get up at 6 and watch film or whatever. I'm not gonna play this year. He's going for it.
And not to say that the other two quarterbacks aren't competitive as all get out, but I'll tell you what, GMAC, that's where he falls in the same line as his head coach, right? Josh Heupel, that competitiveness, that fire that drives you, and of course GMAC certainly has that.
Well, think about this. I mean, we talk about George, but think about how different everybody in that room. Of course, Joey wouldn't have even been here, but I mean, life dramatically changed for everybody back last April in that room. Who embraces that, right? And who can't handle that? Okay. I mean, Jake Merklinger went from thinking, I'm going to be the backup. The only way I'm playing is mop-up duty or if Nico gets hurt. That's the only way I'm on the field. George is going, I'm red shirt. I'm not going to play. I'm going to get a handful of snaps here and there. Joey Aguilar is on the West Coast. Now you throw all them into it, and you learn about the mental makeup of all three of those guys, I think, as you go along. They're all competitive. It's one thing to be competitive. It's another thing to see how you handle that competition. Go back to the first press conference when Joey Halsley stood in there and talked to the media and talked about these guys competing. I mean, this is Georgia's first ever quarterback battle. This is Jake Merklinger's first ever quarterback battle. I mean, those guys were they were the dudes at their school in high school, right? Now they're trying to go win a job that's very winnable for all three of them. And that was not the case in April. So who handles that moment the best? I think that's what we're looking for this week. You kind of, maybe you got a glimpse of it in scrimmage 1, who comes out of scrimmage 1 and handles it the right way, and who really changes things in scrimmage 2. Does anybody do that? I think this week's really fascinating from that standpoint, quarterback wise.
Have we ever had a legit three guy competition?
Not at this point. I mean,
so. I mean, not like where somebody just wasn't getting,
right.
A courtesy look.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say George came out of the blue, out of no man's land, but I mean, it's kind of not what you expected it to be. And you think about quarterback races, you think about years where they played young quarterbacks, true quarterback battles, and all those types of things. There was kind of always a little bit of an initial pecking order if it was a 3-man deal, right? I mean, like you go back to 94, okay? It was Jerry Colquitt's team in 94. Then he tears his knee on the 7th play. Then you were in a state of flux. And everybody was like, well, it's not going to be Todd Helton's team. He's going to Major League Baseball. Like he was a baseball player on a football scholarship. But then you had 2 freshmen, So now all of a sudden you're sort of paring it down. It's not really a 3-man race. It kind of was a 2-man race. In 2004, it was Ainge and Schaefer. There was nobody else in the conversation, Rob. I mean, everybody was like, Tennessee's starting a freshman that year. There was no one else to handle a conversation. In 05, it was Eric Ainge's, and Clausen just wouldn't go away, but it was a 2-man race. There wasn't a third. So to your point, Rob, I don't know when you would have to go back and say, when do you have 3 guys legitimately competing for a job? And right now it feels like that's where you are heading into this second scrimmage.
There should have been a 3-man race when Dobbs was here, but he was ignored.
Fair point.
Here's my question for you guys. And y'all been doing it for years and years. And I remember, doing it on the radio, the practice reports, and obviously the observations here. But it's not, you hear, take, one player who shined, last Tuesday or whatever. Did you hear about him on Wednesday or Thursday? Like, it's a collection of notes to decide how a player or how a unit or how a battle or a team is doing over the course of a camp. It's a collection of notes. So with that being said, we've talked a lot about GMAC. All right. Brent, your overall thoughts to this point in camp, knowing we don't see a lot of practice and obviously we didn't see the scrimmage, but what you have seen and what you have heard, what is your overall thoughts on Jake Merklinger and Joey Aguilar?
I think Joey Aguilar is a guy who's continuing to get comfortable and trying to get comfortable in the offense. Here's why I don't put a great stock in the pick six in the scrimmage. And this was a great point made by a poster on the board. I don't remember who it was. I'll give it credit. I didn't see it. I don't know what happened. Receiver run a wrong route? Was the ball late? Was the ball tipped at the line of scrimmage? What happened to create that? You hear way through a pick six. The first thing you're thinking is he threw an out late and some guy jumped it like Alontae Taylor did against Kentucky and Will Levis and strolled into the end zone.
Or on the inverse Kentucky 2020 at Neyland Stadium.
Yeah, I have no idea. How that came about. So I don't go, oh, that's a great panic. That's a huge panic move there. I know he's had interception issues in his career. He's thrown a bunch. I have no idea why he threw that one. Don't know. I mean, he's also got a quarterback's coach who's screaming in his ear to rip it all the time, right? Take chances, rip it in practice, rip it in the scrimmage. We want to see you, and we can adjust from there. I think Joey is getting better in understanding and managing the offense. I think the question, again, about this quarterback battle, and I think this is where you wonder about Merklinger and you wonder about MacIntyre and you wonder about Joey, is I don't know that any of the three have some great physical trait over the other. Joey's got better legs probably, but I don't know that one of them is just terrifically better with their arm. So it gets back down to who processes, who makes the good decision, who has the ball for the next play, who turns a negative into a positive or negates a negative. Okay. Hendon Hooker could turn a negative into a positive with his legs. Maybe Joey can do that better than any of the three. Okay. But what if one of the other two quarterbacks, Merklinger or George, and both of them can run some, what if they negate a negative because they make a good decision and throw the ball away? Or they hit their check down? Those types of things to me will go to establishing and settling this quarterback debate. Who can eliminate the negative, Rob, and who can take a negative and negate it, turn it into a small positive, or negate it and take the negative away?
And that's why, you would think that, the true freshman would be, have a, huge, be the huge underdog. But when you're talking about negative and positive, again, Joey's not been in the system, but, the knock on him has been that, he's a quote unquote gunslinger and interceptions are a problem. And it's not like Merklinger has, just a ton of experience. And he's been in the room, been in the meeting room, been on the practice field, but, he's not got a ton of meaningful game reps. So it's a weird situation in that, George isn't maybe the underdog the true freshman would normally be in this situation.
Yeah, I want to see these guys out of the pocket. Clearly we don't get to see that in our little bit of a viewing period in practice. We don't get to watch the scrimmage. We saw GMAC run all over the place against twos, threes, and walk-ons in the spring game / practice. But when they do these drills, sometimes bootlegs, or when they had that little drill at the very beginning of practice when we're out there, when they're just kind of throwing on the run. From the little we've seen, it looks like Joey's pretty decent on the run. It looks like George MacIntyre, that can be a true strength for him. And so when you go back to talking about making a negative into a positive, throwing on the run, escapability, you would think Aguilar would have the level up in that because he's been there, done that. He's got some experience, but I think that's going to be a strength for George as well. Where's Jake Merklinger in that regard? I don't know. Again, I just wish we got to see more in this regard. But obviously, quarterback conversation dominating everything in fall camp right now. Push comes to shove, when you leave that scrimmage on Friday, there needs to be a clear direction. I'm not saying name a starter or anything, but there needs to be a direction on, like, okay, we're giving this guy this many reps, this guy this many reps. It's a 3-man down to a 2-man. Hopefully there's some separation in that scrimmage to where the guys are going to be playing against Syracuse and beyond can, try to take advantage of these reps heading into the final 2 weeks before the season opener.